Michelle Banger, Managing Editor of Quality. We're here at the Quality Show, the Assembly Show South, and Adhesives in Action. And I'm here today with Jim Mayer. He's the Manufacturing Connector, and he just gave a presentation talking about culture and values. So Jim, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. This is awesome.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about what you talked about in your session today?
Yeah, today we talked about how manufacturers can create a culture change within their organization by creating the purpose of what they do with their employees, right? Everybody has this pride and this purpose that they want to work for. Younger generations, we're hearing it more and more. We want to work for something bigger. We want to contribute to society, things of that nature. And this is really a big deal in how manufacturers can make this culture change happen. And so I did that all through the lens of creating this culture of quality and making sure that companies live those words that are on their wall.
And so I know one of the things I mentioned at the session was, how did you get into culture yourself? Could you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, and thank you for asking that, by the way, because like I said, not often do people ask me questions. I do a podcast, I'm asking people questions all the time, but not often do I tell my story. So it was kind of a fun, reversal of roles. I got into culture because I had lived through some really bad cultures. From building houses, which is my background, into industrial distribution and working for nonprofits. I've worked all through the industry, the industrial sector, I guess, for over 25 years. And didn't know why I left companies that I left, but I just knew I had left them for a reason. I went back to school, and later in life, I did my undergrad at 30 years old and my MBA shortly after. And that's when I found this thing called organizational development and company culture. And it really defined the reason that I had been unhappy with a lot of the things that I had already experienced in life. So I took those lived experiences, took that skill set of knowledge that I gained through the educational side, and really made that my focus in life, is helping manufacturers build the cultures that they need to build to retain the people that they need to retain.
So could you walk us through the process? What does it look like if someone says, we have a bad culture and we need help? Where do you start?
I will always start, if that's the way they approach me, I will always start with, what is your mission statement, what is your vision statement, and what are your values? If you don't know what they are, then your employees don't know what they are. And in all the research I've done and all the studies I've done in my own history, what I've learned is that culture at its most base form is the alignment of those values between the organization and the employee themselves. So if you as a leader, top level leader, that's coming to somebody like me and saying, we have a bad culture, or we have a toxic workplace, it's typically because you don't know what your mission, vision, and values are, and so neither can your employees.
That makes sense. Do people come in with other things saying we're okay, but we want to be better, or common?
I mean, every company has a culture, whether they are intentional about it or not. So sometimes people come to me and say, yeah, we've got a bad culture. Sometimes people come to me and say, we've got a good culture. We just want to adjust our culture to add accountability or quality or some other term that they are lacking within their culture. More times than not, people just come to me and say, I can't keep the people that I need to keep. And that's really a cultural issue in itself. So that's really the biggest issue. I mean, we're seeing, you're a publication, you like statistics, we're seeing 45 to 50% turnover in manufacturing last year alone. That's massively high, and the cost of that is tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to each manufacturer. So if we can reduce that by keeping people around, that helps with overhead, that helps with process flow. It helps with everything to be able to keep people. So that's the main reason people come to me, I guess.
And can you give me an example of a bad culture turned good, or just any kind of story that would illustrate it?
So one of the companies that I worked with, multi-generational organization, company in Phoenix, Arizona. I won't mention them by name, but they are in Phoenix, Arizona. Third generation ownership. Owner had never worked on the shop floor. And so he would come in and treat it like his own personal maker space, I guess, where he would come in and have his machinists move customer parts off of machines to make his own things. And he came to me at an industry event and said, I don't know why I have such high turnover. And I asked him, well, what's your turnover like? And he said, we have a new training class every 3 weeks or so. And this is a 80-person machine shop. It's not hundreds of thousands where you would think that there's a new training class every. So we started with their mission, vision, and values. I looked at their organizational chart, looked at how they were structured to make sure that there was appropriate alignment, appropriate leadership at the top. We made a lot of adjustments. We did an employee engagement survey to understand the employee sentiment. We created a committee of employees to help create the change on the shop floor to make those lower items on the engagement survey stick. We did a second survey about a year later after laying out the framework. Their engagement scores had risen. We reduced their turnover by about 40%. We increased their revenue by about 26%. So just by measuring their employee engagement, by making some changes, structural changes, systemic changes within their organization, we were able to save them a lot of money. And now they actually have a line of people waiting to work for this organization, which is pretty cool. The owner is now, for the most part, walked away. He's still CEO of the organization, still there as the figurehead, but he's not able to walk in every day. He's now hired a president for the organization, and it's somebody with a lot of experience, and he's running the place very well.
Oh, that sounds great. I mean, just thinking every 3 weeks, he's like, now we can only do it every 6 weeks. It's perfect.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and he was an owner. When he walked me through the facility, he didn't know his employees' names. He only knew like maybe a third of his employees' names out on the shop floor. And that's a tough situation. When the owner doesn't know your name, you know you've got some issues.
Yeah, especially probably some of them have been there a while at least, you know.
Yes.
They're like, I've seen you for years, but.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, well, that's hard. That's a good example. And so in terms of workforce trends, it seems like it is so hard to recruit people. Is there any advice you give people when they want to promote, like that they do have a good culture, they're very good place to work, you know, employees are happy, that kind of thing?
Branding, marketing and branding. I'm a big proponent of, instead of HR owning employee engagement, HR owning company culture. I think that top level leadership, of course, should own those things. But I think that your marketing department is usually more actionable when it comes to highlighting the positive things that are going on within your culture, within your organization. So I think your marketing department is a big part of that, because if you don't talk about it, if you don't tell the story of your people and how your people make the things that they make, then you're not marketing that culture, you're just marketing your stuff. I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know I mentioned to you earlier there was kind of talk about ISO standards now, like 9001, including culture as a point to notice. And how would you say people should look at that, or what's your take on that, basically?
I actually after I spoke, I went and had lunch, and I sat there with my laptop and my phone, and I'm looking at these proposed standards. I'm going to have to change the way that I assess culture to be able to help people with their cultural component of those ISO standards. But I love the fact that this is now part of it, because it is a process. It's not just fly-by-night buzzword, right? Culture is truly a thing that keeps your organization going, and it is a process to make it healthy and sustainable. So I love that I would have to have a follow-up conversation with you on how we can actually do this, but I think that there will be a very defined way that people are going to be able to look at their culture in a process-based sense, and be able to meet those ISO components or requirements just by measuring very easily a couple of very simple factors. But I don't have that defined. I don't have it defined well enough that I can talk about it just yet.
Sure, yeah. I think just in general, it's a good sign that, like you said, it's not just like OSHA requirements, don't put fire cabinets on top of wood pallets, but also like, what is your turnover? How do your employees know your, mission? And
absolutely.
All that stuff. So that makes sense. And then the other thing I want to mention was, I know you're a big F1 racing fan.
Yes.
And you like to use analogies regarding that. Can you give us one of your favorites, or do you have any that come to mind?
Yes. So the one that I use all the time, I became a fan of F1 during COVID, right? Professional sports really wasn't a thing in early COVID, but there was this thing called F1 racing, and it was racing, and it was like racing to the most racingest racing, right? I mean, your wheels are open, the cockpit's open, it's super intense. And what I loved about it was the pit stop, coming from a leadership, coming from a teamwork kind of perspective. Those pit stops are called the fastest 2 seconds in sports. And it's because the person who's changing the front tire isn't worried about what the person on the back or the back rear tire is doing. They all know their job so well, and they execute flawlessly. So when I'm doing leadership development trainings and workshops on leadership topics in general, I always try and kind of shoehorn in an F1 analogy, but my one about the knowing your role, doing your job, and the pit stop, that's got to be one of my favorites.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I mean, I feel like it's so easy too to be like, I think they're not doing well. It's like, maybe so, but you know, do your thing and we'll get to them next.
Absolutely.
So.
If you focus on yourself and you execute, and you have built this culture of accountability and feedback and ownership of duty, then you don't have to worry about the person next to you, because you know that they're working to the same standard that you are, whether their job is different than yours or not.
Mm-hmm. That makes me think, like, what if you're an employee at somewhere that culture could use some work? Is there something that like one person can do on their own that you recommend, or just? Yeah,
I mean, everybody in any industry, in any organization can be a leader. You don't have to have a title to be a leader. You can hold people accountable, right? You can build trust. There are things that you can do on your own without being like that top level leadership title that can affect the culture. And I see it all the time. I work with a shop in very rural Arizona right now. And they've got some floor leaders that aren't titled leaders, but they're experienced in holding people accountable. So if a part gets to them and it's not done well, they push it back to the department before them and they hold them accountable, which is changing the whole dynamic and changing the whole culture out on the floor to one where people are more comfortable holding each other accountable. They're more comfortable building the trust that's needed to hold them accountable.
Yeah, that does make sense that, one person can make a difference if they're, spreading this, positive and,
absolutely,
whatever. So,
and that's the thing about culture, Michelle, is it's all individual, right? So, and you heard me say in my session today, what could be a healthy culture for you could be completely toxic to me, and vice versa. I don't think it is, because I think you and I, just in our conversations, are fairly aligned on values and things of that nature, but because everybody's values are so individualistic, the way that they align with organizations' values, make it unique to them, whether they're going to view a culture as toxic or not. There's no way that anybody can walk in the door and say, this is a toxic culture as a blanket statement. They can walk in the door and say, this is a toxic culture for me. So it really boils down to that individual. It's not just a blanket statement. And that's one of the biggest things that I've learned over the course of the last 8 years is when I first started doing these culture assessments, I would come in and tell people, I think your culture is toxic. And it was toxic to me, but in reality, they had lower than industry average turnover because they had found people who aligned with their values. So that's just one caveat I wanted to plug in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And that's interesting. Like you said, some people fit certain cultures or values. So
yeah,
that makes sense. So I think those were the main things I wanted to ask you about. But can you tell us a little bit more about what you have coming next? I know you have a lot of projects in the pipeline.
Yeah. I mean, where to start on that? Next week, I launch my leadership workshop tour. It's called Lead the Change Tour. I'm going to 20 cities across the U.S., starting in Cleveland next week. I'm doing 2 different workshops. One is a one-day workshop, and that'll be in Cleveland and 15 other cities. It's on leading change in digital transformation. So it takes the concept of people actually do love change. If they didn't love change, we wouldn't have restaurant industry. We wouldn't have fashion or tourism as industries in themselves. People love change. They just love change that they get to be the author of. And so taking that concept and relaying it to digital transformation. And so talking with owners on what is a big resistance to change in our shops, how they can assess readiness for change, and then how they can build into their culture the ability to change and innovate as part of their culture. So that's a one-day workshop, again, kicking off in Cleveland. The week after that is my 3-day workshop, and that's on becoming management material. That's for the individual contributors that we historically promote before they have any leadership skills. So historically in our industry, we take that best machinist, that best welder, that best assembly person, whatever it looks like, and we make them a leader when the person in front of them dies or retires or gets fired. And so this is giving some upfront leadership skills to those people to help organizations build that leadership bench. So when we do see some of these wave of silver tsunami retirements, these organizations will have people who have leadership skills. So not only are they great at what they do, but they've got some of the innate skills at that point to be able to go out and lead themselves within these organizations. So that's one of the things I'm working on. Megan Jimba has talked me into writing a book with her. So we're working on that right now, which is a lot of fun and something. She is a very, very convincing human being. So I'm glad she talked me into it. So just working on a lot of cool stuff. Got the podcasts out and just having fun.
Sounds good. Yeah, Megan mentioned that in her podcast earlier too.
Oh, did she really?
So
all right.
It's a big topic. Yeah, preview. So makes sense. I think that's all the time we have. But thank you again for your time. Really appreciate it. A lot of great stuff. Yeah,
I love being on it. I love being on the other side of the interview questions. You did a great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a tough act to follow. Great. So thank you all for listening. For more, you can always visit qualitymag.com.